Hey there, good afternoon, how's it going? Today is Sunday, March 8th, 2026. So yesterday I managed to catch a flight from Muscat, Oman to Chennai, India, and then caught a taxi directly down here to Mahabalipuram on the east coast of South India. I will be making videos showing this town very soon. So I spent the past week in the Middle East, not by choice, stuck there because of the events, and as I just said, managed to catch a flight out of Oman yesterday. And so I wanted to offer some tips and hopefully helpful, useful information for those who are still stuck there in a number of countries in the Middle East and want to get out. And that means thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people at this point. I'm going to start by giving a very quick recap of my overall experience. I was in Budapest, Hungary. I decided to come to India. I booked a series of flights from Budapest, layover in Istanbul, layover in Doha, Qatar, and then another flight from there to Mumbai, India. And so flew to Istanbul and then overnight flight. This was February 27th, late in the night, landing in Doha, Qatar at around 3 in the morning on February 28th. I went to sleep, woke up around noon, and turned on my phone to get an emergency alert. My first thought was, oh man, I wonder if the US just invaded Iran. I checked the news, sure enough, that had just happened. I had a flight booked out around 7 p.m. that evening. Didn't really think too much of it as far as the possibility of that flight getting canceled, but a few hours later got a notice from Air India that flight was canceled, and then I realized, oh man, this is definitely a bad situation. And so I was in Doha for a few days. I've made a bunch of videos documenting all of my experiences and everything there. I went to the embassies and was, in the process of researching the various options. It became more and more clear that leaving overland was a good idea to look seriously into. I wasn't quite to the point of, first of all, committing to doing that, second of all, knowing how to do it, and third of all, knowing where to go. But then a series of events ultimately led to me leaving Doha, Qatar, and getting a ride to United Arab Emirates, to Abu Dhabi first, and then Al Ain on the Oman border, and then from there getting to Muscat, Oman, and then catching my flight the next day. And so I'm just going to leave it at that as far as the past week, and then I will be mentioning and referencing things in the course of giving some more information about what people can at least consider doing in order to hopefully be able to get out. So a few kind of introductory things that I want to mention first. One is that the president of Iran has apologized to the Gulf countries for bombing them, or at least bombing the US military bases in those countries. But of course there have been various missile hits to the US Embassy in Riyadh, to a hotel in Dubai, etc. And in this statement, then the president of Iran also vowed to stop bombing the Gulf countries. Now, that is hopefully good news that with the bombing stopping, the airports will then open soon thereafter and people can just fly out, and then all of the information in this video is going to be kind of irrelevant. But since that statement, there have still been missile attacks. I don't know what the latest is. As far as I know, the Doha airport still has not opened after 8 or 9 days now, and the Dubai airport got hit, and so there is no guarantee on that, basically, that is going to be the ultimate solution for everyone. So people need to be seriously considering other ways, and the only other way is overland. I will get to that in just a minute, but I want to mention something very, very important here that people need to keep in mind, especially social media influencers, but really anybody sharing information online about their situation and about what's going on in general. And that is that I just learned that Qatar is arresting people for sharing what they call misinformation. And so I'm going to show you that news story here. 194 arrested for spreading misinformation and citing public opinion. Doha, March 5th. So today, as I said, March 8th, so 3 days ago, the Ministry of Interior said that the Economic and Cybercrimes Combating Department at the General Directorate of Criminal Investigation has arrested 194 individuals of various nationalities for filming and circulating video clips, as well as publishing misleading information and rumors that incite public opinion and violate the instructions issued by the relevant authorities. Now, I am going to make another whole separate video talking much more in depth about that, because that could have very well affected me based on one video in particular that I posted on my YouTube channel here. But just keep that in mind if you are posting content about what is going on. Be very careful about what you are posting, and basically make sure it is nothing that could be interpreted as misinformation, that could be considered to be a threat to the, order and peace of society. And certainly don't post anything that is considered disrespectful to the government and the leaders, etc. So I'm sure that just posting about your personal experience should be fine, but anything involving military info, what's going on, tactics, stuff like that, if you are in the region, then definitely avoid doing that. Now, some more bad news. Unfortunately, I want to share a comment that somebody posted under my latest video. This is Ellen Ray Smith 4391. Gabriel, there are no emergency evacuation flight out options. The U.S. State Department was gutted by Felon 47, so you can guess who they are referring to there, last year. No one from the work group at State is left to get you out. There is a private evacuation company, Dale Buckner, CEO of Global Guardian, that is getting people out of Saudi Arabia by private charter jet. Cost is $11,000 to $25,000 US per person. Also, I've heard about a organization called Grable that is also organizing flights out. Now, in that comment they said none. I'm quite certain that is false. I think that what Ellen there was referring to was United States in particular evacuation flights. I have no idea if that is true or false there. This could be misinformation that I am spreading. But look into it yourself. If anybody has information, specific, hard information about United States evacuation flights, then absolutely post a comment below about that. But I am not aware of any going out of Doha, Qatar. I am in touch with a few people who are still stuck there. I have heard about evacuation flights of other countries going out of various countries in the region. And so that very well may be an option for people. If commercial flights aren't working, the airports still aren't open, then that is a possible route to go. I am glad that I did not count on that because, for one thing, as I just said, then I haven't heard about any emergency evacuation flights for United States citizens or Canadians, because I am dual American Canadian. I haven't heard about any specific flights out of Doha, Qatar, where I was and would have been stuck if I hadn't gotten myself out of there. Even if there were, then I'm sure that it is pretty difficult to get on those flights. And so that is one of the factors to keep in mind, is that it could be a long wait getting onto an emergency evacuation flight. And so basically kind of what all this ultimately comes down to is that process of elimination says if the airport is closed wherever you are and you can't get a commercial flight, that isn't going to work. If you haven't heard about evacuation flights or don't know how to get on one, or you've contacted your embassy but aren't getting any helpful information, etc., then that is not an option. Boat is not an option, just forget about that one. The only other option left is the land route, and so that is what I am going to finally focus on now. So as I said, then I managed to get out of Doha, Qatar, overland, and drive the journey to Muscat, Oman. And then plus border crossing times, and the border crossing from Doha, Qatar into Saudi Arabia, that was a long one that took several hours. And so first I will give my best recommendation, and I thought a fair amount about whether this was really a good thing to encourage, to whatever extent this video could possibly actually result in, a fair amount of people making decisions based on the information here. But I think that it is perfectly fine to recommend this, which is go to Oman, what I did. So once I finally got to Oman, then I was at a hotel right near the airport, looking at the airport, and I had no clue what to expect as far as wait times. Somebody had told me that it could be up to 10 hours waiting to get, all checked in and everything through security, etc. at the airport. Now, maybe their information was based on the Dubai airport or Abu Dhabi or elsewhere, but I'm going to show you now a video clip of the check-in line for my Oman Air flight. So that was not a long line, that was not a chaotic scene. That is one example of why you should really consider going to Oman. The airport is fully functional. I would say 90% of the flights were going out. Looking at the boards there inside the airport, there were a few cancellations, but most of the flights were going out. There was almost no lines at all for check-in. That was actually the longest line. For customs and security, literally like 2 or 1 or 3 people or whatever in front of me on those. Now, this was middle of the night. I arrived at 2 in the morning. Daytime could, of course, and almost certainly will be more busy. But so number one, flights are going out. The airport is normal. It's not a crazy, chaotic scene. But in addition to that, then Oman is the safest country in the region. One of the safest anyways, you could say, perhaps tied with Saudi Arabia. And so look at this graphic here showing the total number of missile attacks on the various Gulf countries. As you can see, United Arab Emirates is at number 1, so to speak, with the most hits. I think it says 683 missile attacks launched by Iran at the United Arab Emirates. Now that would have been primarily focused on, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, or anyways, the military bases near there. Number 2, Kuwait, despite the fact that Kuwait is a tiny little country. And then number 3, Qatar, where I was. And then number 4, Bahrain. And then look at Oman and Saudi Arabia, 2 each. And the 2 missile strikes on Oman were very likely accidental. Not sure about the ones that hit Saudi Arabia, but 2 is a much better number than 683 when it comes to missiles. I think we can all agree on that. And so Oman is a much safer place to be in general. So for those 2 reasons, then Oman is really the place to try to get to. If anything should transpire in which the airport shuts down, for example, and you're stuck in Oman, then that is a better place to be stuck than in United Arab Emirates, or certainly Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, tiny little countries where you are trapped and really have nowhere else to go. Now, it could really depend on which country you are currently trapped in. So if you are in Kuwait, Bahrain, or Qatar, then it probably makes much more sense to go to Saudi Arabia. That is much closer, and to the best of my understanding, then Riyadh and Dammam airports are operating normally, despite that missile attack on the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. And I had heard a report that the Riyadh airport had closed down, but I think that it was a temporary closure. So if you're in those countries, you probably want to go to Saudi Arabia. If you are in the United Arab Emirates, then try to get to Oman. So if you are going to try to travel overland, then this is really the meat of the matter, so to speak, which is how to do it. And that is the difficult part, for which I have no easy answer other than to say you're going to need to get a driver. Buses could be an option. I would say more likely in the U.A.E. I would say out of Qatar, from what I found, there was one bus per week going to Riyadh. That's just what I found online. Not sure if that is, all that there is as far as buses, but I wasn't finding much of anything. I would assume the same with Bahrain and Kuwait. I would say with those countries, then forget about public transportation. You will need to pay for a driver. With the U.A.E., much more likely that there could be buses that will get to Oman. But ultimately, what it is going to come down to for many people is you need to hire a driver. And when it comes to that, then the news is not great. So these guys on YouTube, Tri-Fate Lifestyle, paid $1,000 for a driver to take them from Qatar to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Those prices for, taxis, drivers, whatever, are going to vary considerably depending on all kinds of factors: distance, how many borders you have to cross, the particular person, etc. But they aren't going to be cheap. They're making hazard pay, you could say, in terms of driving through what is, to a great extent a war zone, and also just all of the hassle and the unknown of dealing with border crossings and how fast they can be and all that kind of stuff. So I don't have any kind of bulletproof tips as far as how to get a driver. You just have to research every possibility. Ask the front desk at your hotel. Keep your ears open. Ask anybody that you might be in touch with. I will recommend Alyssa Ramos of My Life's a Travel movie, who was stuck in Kuwait along with a group of 5 other women, and they managed to pay a driver, I don't know how much, to get them from Kuwait to Riyadh. And she also created a chat group of some sort on WhatsApp, I think, that is focused on trying to help people who are stuck. So that is worth looking into. Try to find, a driver through Facebook or Instagram or whatever you come across. Then all I can say is best of luck with that. I don't know how difficult that will be, but what it will come down to for many, many people is you just got to get a driver out of there. And so good luck with that. Now, I want to mention here border crossings. So I'm going to discuss the border crossings that I made: Qatar to Saudi Arabia to U.A.E, U.A.E into Oman. First, I will mention the 2 main border crossings of Oman, because this is a very, very important point, especially because a lot of people will be stuck in Dubai. I heard that there were wait times at that border of 10 hours going from Dubai to Muscat, Oman, at the more northeasterly part of the United Arab Emirates. Whereas my experience going across the border from Al Ain, which is close to Abu Dhabi, over the border to Bahrain, and then from there to Muscat, it was like 2 cars in front of me, or maybe even just 1. Almost no wait time. There was a bit of a wait once we got to the booth, and we're waiting for the security guy there to check the passport and car registration. So keep that one in mind, that your driver will need to have car registration. It would be a real shame for them to drive all the way to the border and then have to turn around and go back, as well as insurance, proof of insurance. And so it was like 15, 20 minutes maximum getting across that border. So if you're in Dubai, look at the map, and it isn't that far out of the way, if at all, to go from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, or maybe you don't even need to go to Abu Dhabi, just go as directly as you can to Al Ain. And then keep in mind that there are 2 different border crossings near Al Ain, and one allows foreigners and one does not. So the more direct one from Al Ain to Buremi apparently does not allow foreigners to cross, although there was also a comment from somebody saying that they were allowing foreigners to cross that border now because of these circumstances. And so I don't know about that, but you might want to look into that. But otherwise, it isn't that far out of the way to go to the other border crossing, which is a bit further. It's like a 10-minute drive or something further, and then you cross, and then you come back over to Bahraini. So keep that in mind, that if you are going to go to Oman, then I highly recommend that border crossing. Now, kind of the final thing that I'm going to get to is the experience of going from Doha, Qatar to Saudi Arabia and what that was like, because there is some critical information here that could be very useful for people, and if things had gone differently, I could have been stuck in a bad situation. The first is that I highly recommend getting the Saudi Arabia e-visa online in advance. Now, I tried to, and the website wasn't working. I should mention here what I probably should have mentioned a while ago, which is that the way that I got out was that a viewer of mine contacted me who lives in Abu Dhabi and offered me a ride. And so not everybody has that, kind of situation in which somebody's just going to get in touch with you and say, hey, I'll get you out. So I didn't have to deal with the whole finding a driver situation or paying them. So Muhammad was incredibly generous. I offered to help him out in that regard, and he said, no, this is, me just paying it forward, so to speak, just helping out somebody in need. So massive thanks, of course, to Muhammad for that. But that leads into the events of my actually getting out, because Muhammad offered to come pick me up in Doha, and I thought about it and said, great, I'm going to take you up on your offer, but I think a better plan is that I meet you on the other side of the border in Saudi Arabia so that I get that all done and then meet you there, and then we turn around and head for Abu Dhabi in the U.A.E. And then I'm getting stuff out of the way rather than him crossing that border, driving an hour to Doha, getting me, and then having to go through the border crossing, etc. And so that was most certainly the way to go. So I just caught an Uber from Doha to the border. That cost only like $30 or so for an hour. If you do the math on that, then a ride from Doha to Riyadh, for example, which is 6 or 7 hours away, $30 an hour, that should then mean $200 or so to get there. Plus border crossing time, of course. So not exactly 200, but $1,000 for that same route is obviously way overinflated compared to $200 or $300 or $400, but that is just the way that it's going to be. And so, as I said, I had tried to get the Saudi Arabian visa online that same day, but another complication, other than the fact that the website wasn't working, is that it says expedited takes up to 48 hours. And so if you are going to get out of, wherever you are today, then you might want to skip the online e-visa so that you aren't then sitting there waiting like, okay, where's the email? Like, it would probably be quicker than 48 hours, I'm sure. But you don't want to be ready to go waiting for that. So in that case, just get the visa at the border because you can. I would assume this is the case coming from the U.A.E. as well. But the downside is that that is what took a while once I actually got to the border. So you can catch an Uber from Doha to the border, but that is probably not going to be relevant for most of you, because if you're paying a driver, then they're going to take you from exactly wherever you are. Really, the only reason that you would be doing that, just catching an Uber, getting yourself to the border of Saudi Arabia somehow on your own, is if you had a driver waiting for you on the other side, and that is probably not going to be the case for most people. But anyways, I will explain this just in case this happens to come in useful for anybody out there, which is that you can't walk across the border. And this makes perfect sense, but I didn't know, this at the time, and I had a million things to think about, and so my plan was just get to the border and then figure out, how to get across from there. So I get the Uber, we arrive at the border area, and then it's kind of confusing because there's no obvious place that an Uber driver can drop me at a border like that. And so we actually end up driving into an area in which you could see gates on the other side that my Uber driver was then going to have to go back through. And that's kind of a whole story of what happened there that I won't tell now. I told that already in a previous video. But basically, what you want to keep in mind is that you cannot walk across the border. You have to be in a vehicle. And the way to do it, if you're doing it this way, is that you go to this roundabout. And so the roundabout is right where you start to enter the border area. At that roundabout, then there are cars. There's a big sign that says, "Welcome to Qatar." Massive, massive, massive billboard. And then the street going to the right, rather than the street going across the border, right there will be cars, and there are taxi drivers there who are authorized to cross the border. And so you will then get out of the Uber or whatever ride you got there and get into the taxi, and you'll have to pay them. I ended up paying about $150 basically to get across there. No idea what the real price might be for a service like that, but it took a while. It took 3 or so hours, in large part because I didn't have the visa already. And so I won't get into explaining more of what happened there because you'll figure that out once you get there. But basically, you want to have the visa, preferably if you can, in advance to save some time. If not, then you can get that visa on the border. So I think that basically wraps up what I can offer as far as information for getting out. But let's make the comment section down below a library of information for people who are trying to get out. If you have any information about how to get a driver, about border crossings, about airports being open or closed, etc., then go ahead and put it down below. And all I can say is good luck, hope for the best. Let's really, really, really hope that the pledge by the president of Iran to stop bombing the Gulf countries is actually true and being implemented now so that the airports can open, and then basically this entire video, everything I've said is irrelevant. You just catch a flight out. So all the best to everyone out there. Have a good one.